The following programming is sponsored by Mark J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Peasley Media Group. Entrepreneur, founder, author, and financial advisor Mark Bernstein helps high-performing business owners turn their visions into reality. Through his innovative work and the Forward Focus Forums, Mark connects entrepreneurs to resources that fuel their success. Founders Forum is a radio show and podcast where entrepreneurs share their journeys, revealing the lessons they've learned and the stories behind their success. Join Mark and his guests for a mix of inspiration, valuable insights, and a little fun. Now, let's dive in.
Good morning, America. How are you? Do I hear an echo in here?
Good morning, America. How are you?
Hey, good morning, America.
Hey, that was great. I like that. We've never really done that before. So here we are in our last couple of shows, last 3 shows actually in Southwest Florida. So what we've been doing while we're doing it here is we've been recording a couple shows at a time for future play. So I've got 2 great guests today, and I don't want to forget about Roger Marley, our engineer in the studio, who has done a great job. It's really been fun working with you, Raj, and we'll do it again next season. Yeah, big thumbs up from Roger.
Yeah, Roger.
Yeah,
boy, Roger.
Roger. So, and we're anyway. So our guests, we're gonna have some fun today. Our guests are 2 more people I've met while I'm in Babcock Ranch, and I keep talking about Babcock Ranch because there's a lot to talk about, and they may even want to add to the conversation. But it's the hometown of tomorrow, and it's a lot of cool things going on there in Southwest Florida, and we all found out about it in different ways, and I think we're all loving it there, and I'm loving it here, and can't wait to come back after we return north to Philadelphia for a while. So we have with us this morning, that was Sari and Jason, and I'll introduce them formally in a minute. But our topic of the day, because it keeps coming up every day that I'm talking to people in different ways, is AI. And I've done a lot of shows on AI, and we've had AI founders on here, and they're advocates for AI. And we've also talked about the dangers of AI. But I just want to get your impressions, because since I've done it, it's been a few months, and things have evolved a lot since then, both on the business side and on the innovation side and on the regulatory side of it. And I just want to get your thoughts. And Sari, as you'll find out, is a technology person. So let's start with you.
Sure. So, when I think about AI right now, I just think about it as a problem-solving tool, which is really what it is, right?
Yep.
It's leading to innovation, but it's a lot like the car was or the internet. It's a tool right now. Tomorrow, though, with the next generation of AI, which is known as artificial general intelligence, it will really start rivaling human intelligence without intervention. And then ultimately, the theoretical is artificial superintelligence, which surpasses human intelligence. So when I'm thinking about AI now, I'm really thinking about the guardrails. Right? What do we do in terms of governance? What do we do in terms of ethics? And then how are our adversaries using AI in ways that potentially seek to harm us?
That was great. You covered all my questions all in one little paragraph.
Most of it was way over my head, to be honest.
But the last part that you talked about, surpassing human intelligence, was the conversation I was having yesterday, because I've been told that's less than 5 years away, which is pretty great.
I think a lot of that really depends on the development of supercomputers that can handle that. And with chips in flux right now, who knows what the time frame actually is, right? And what's happening in the research universities, that could have an impact as well. But it'll come, and so that's why the guardrails and the ethics components of it are so critical right now to be talking about.
Jason, what is within your range to talk about?
Yeah, no, what's interesting is, and actually Sari kind of highlighted something that I've experienced recently, because in my business, as you're going to introduce me soon, in the commercial real estate business, we don't have a ton right now to do with AI, but I have, kind of an interesting story that the guardrail piece is super important. And I would say for sure, Sari, because I have a couple of young children still, and I've seen how they have started to use AI on their own, even for schoolwork or things like that, and it's causing problems, even on such a small micro level like that. We're at home. Imagine what it can do to impact business for entrepreneurs like ourselves if there aren't guardrails that are put out in the future. So
I would agree. I think it introduces a level of bias we have to be very careful about.
You're probably right there. Yeah.
Well, a lot of good information in that short period of time, because we have to move on, because we all know how quick 28 minutes goes on the show. So I do want to introduce them. So I'll introduce Jason first, because we'll do his longer introduction on his on his show, but Jason Spire, did I say it correctly?
Perfectly.
Cool. Jason Wheels Spire.
That's it.
And you'll understand the wheels better in a bit when you hear
Yeah.
his story, but also I think of Wheels on Fire, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I remember it. So anyway, he's president and owner of multiple family-owned businesses, primarily called under the Fidelity Group. And when we get to his show, you'll hear a lot more about that. Sari Greene, as you might have already figured out, is a cybersecurity entrepreneur. She's also an author, educator, investor, community activist, and she serves on currently. Her company was called Sage
Data Security.
Data Security, and you'll hear her. She no longer owns the company, but she's very active, serving on the Bangor, Maine Savings Bank Board of Directors and chairs the Enterprise Risk Management Committee of that. She was appointed by the governor of Maine to the Maine Gambling Control Board and served as election official for the city of South Portland, Maine. Sari is an NACD board fellow and has earned numerous tech and cybersecurity related certifications. And she's an enthusiastic traveler and particularly an avid sailor, which is an interesting part of her story, which hopefully we can get to. I know it'll come into it. And also she's an active Rotarian. So welcome, Sari. Welcome.
Thank you.
Casey.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to have you both here today. So Sari, it's interesting how you became an entrepreneur. And why don't you tell us from the beginning how that started?
Sure. So I think it started somewhere around kindergarten when I decided I needed to raise some money. And instead of doing lemonade, I thought, well, what do we have a lot of inventory of? And in my house,
Wait till you hear the rest of the
my
stories.
parents were big users of dry cleaners. So we had a lot of hangers. And I thought everybody needs hangers, and we have them. So my grandparents were taking care of
We
me.
just moved in. I wish you were around now.
Right. I
At
could have
that
used
time.
those a few years ago when I moved into our
Well,
place
I set up
too.
my card table and my little sign, 5 cents a hanger, and took every piece of clothing I think in the household off their hangers and brought them out to the front. And my grandparents were a little appalled and said, "You can't do that." And I was like, I was always bossy, even as a little kid. And I was like, I can, and I will. And my dad's a doc, and they called my father and said, "I think you should come home and see what your daughter's doing." And so he raced home. His office was 5 minutes or so from the house, came in, saw what I was doing, I think maybe a little embarrassed, told me I had to count how many hangers I had, account for my entire inventory, paid me the 5 cents per hanger for my inventory with the caveat that I brought it into the house and put everything back on the hangers. And I think that was my first of many entrepreneurial pursuits.
That might have been your best because you got your father to pay for something that he already owned.
That's right.
Yep, that's good.
It's pretty cool. So, and your father was was a doctor, but he was an entrepreneur.
He was an entrepreneur. He had his own practice. Yeah, absolutely.
So how did that, how did your education bring you to starting a business, and your education and your experience? How did you get there?
So it turns out that I'm not a particularly good employee, but I'm a great boss, I think. And so
I've noticed that in the little time
there
I
you
did.
go.
Yeah.
So
Even on the
I've
golf
got,
course.
I've got
Even
very
on the golf
definite ideas, and I feel very strongly about them. And so I worked for other people for a while, and then moved into co-founding a technical education center. And then after I left that, I wanted to do something else, and it was 2001 and 2002, and decided to launch a data security business, which was an interesting time to do it because
interesting.
when I would say to people, I'm launching a data security business, you know what they said to me? They all said, "What's that?
right.
What's
Yeah.
that?" And now, 25 some years later, when I say to people I had a data security company, they're like, "Oh, yeah, that was a good time to do
Great
it."
idea.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody, of course, we all use the term cybersecurity now, not data security, but
You're definitely ahead of your time. Everyone
Right.
talks about
yeah,
data security.
it was really the time to do it.
Very interesting. So how did you go? I know you had a job for a bit before you started your company. So tell us how that progression worked.
So, actually, I had co-founded a technical training center, and then when that sort of my partnership there dissolved, then we did my husband and I and kids did a sailing sabbatical, came back, and it was time to do something new. And I'd been in tech my whole career, and I was getting more and more concerned about the amount of data that we were all collecting, and were we protecting that appropriately? Did we even know how to protect it appropriately? And because I had an education side background at that point as well as the tech, I thought, it'd be really good if we had a company that taught people how to protect their data. And this is also the beginning of the regulatory era where we had HIPAA for the privacy and security of medical data and GLBA, Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, for the privacy and security of financial data. So I said, I'm going to establish a training center primarily to teach everyone from executives or decision makers to folks who are putting their hands on the firewalls how to protect the data.
And it was called SAGE, presumably because you're sharing wisdom and
Actually not.
Not?
So, because one of the first people who were working with me was a dear friend who was in sales, and her name was Allison Earnhardt, and her husband said, if we go Sari, Allison, Greene, Earnhardt, we have SAGE.
Right.
And that's how we came up
That's
with
really
SAGE
cool.
Data
Very
Security.
Very cool.
And so we started with a 3-classroom training
I think
center.
it works because it's all about information and
Yeah, it worked great. But a 3-classroom training center, and just launched and went forward with the idea of do good, be good. Do good work and be good to your employees, to your customers, and to their customers.
And I know you wanted to serve the community as well. That's part of the Be Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've thought from the beginning of data security or cybersecurity really is a civic duty, right? It's, and the way we would talk to our clients, which were primarily financial institutions and hospitals, were that their patients and their customers were sharing very private data with them, right? And so by them protecting it, it was really a matter of honoring the public trust. And that's really the way I've always thought about it.
But you the company morphed into something else.
It did. So we thought initially we would do about 80% training and about 20% consulting, but we listened to our clients, and our clients said, gee, we really need people to come and do the work you're doing. So we listened to them, and we started with setting up Chief Information Security Officer services for them. Then we moved into threat hunting, and we created one of the first major threat hunting applications in the country, and started really being able to be very proactive to look for anomalous or suspicious activity, and over time all our classrooms closed up and turned into into workspaces, and by the end we were probably doing maybe 5% education and really about 85% services, 95% services.
Whenever I talk to entrepreneurs, I always talk about that being an entrepreneur is not a smooth ride. Jason will be able to speak to that.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. Me too, and almost everyone I have on the show. But not Sari when I first talked to her, because she said, actually things went along pretty smoothly. But we drove here this morning together from Babcock Ranch, and she said, I was thinking about it. There was one really challenge I have, and I'm thinking, we have a couple minutes. We'll just introduce it, but I think we'll get more into it after the break. But there was one challenge that you did face, which could have really hurt the company in a major way. It didn't end up doing that. But do you want to mention it real quick? But I think we'll have to finish it.
Yeah, so we brought in some investors. We were, 2012, so we were 10 years into the company when we first brought in some investors, and bringing in investors brought in its own set of challenges that we can talk about.
That sounds great. So let's take a quick break, commercial break, and we'll be back on Founders Forum in just a minute.
Are you looking to scale your business and drive exceptional growth? Imagine having an expert team on demand that combines world-class recruitment experts and industry-leading next-gen AI to help you hire top candidates faster. Introducing Join Talent, seamlessly augmenting your in-house talent function with expertise tailored to your unique business needs. Our team are experts in hiring the best talent for your sector, regardless of your position on the growth journey. Join Talent's proprietary AI accelerates delivery by instantly searching and indexing billions of data points to find and engage the best talent. Whether you're a startup with limited in-house talent resources or a head of talent for a global enterprise looking to ramp up and down your existing team, we've got you covered. Our solutions are designed to fuel your growth, ensuring you have the right talent at the right time. Join Talent, driving business performance and scaling growth with the perfect blend of people, AI, and innovation. Ready to elevate your hiring capability? Visit jointalent.net today.
Hey, we're back on Founders Forum with our guest today, Sari Greene, and we have Jason Svire in the studio with us, who will please listen to his show, part 1 and part 2 as well, because it's quite a story. So, Sari, we're starting to talk about you got investors into your company and they presented challenges. Let's talk about that.
So they did, So I initially bootstrapped the company. So it's all on me. Built a great leadership team. We were profitable from about year 3 on. Things were going really well. But as I mentioned earlier, we had this threat hunting application and we really needed to enhance it. And it meant that I wanted to do a multi-million-dollar build out of the application
Just describe
itself.
real quick what threat hunting
So threat hunting means that, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So that just means that we're taking information that's logged by all the various different devices in a network, whether it's your firewall or your computer or an application or a database, and being able to look at the log of activities to determine if there's any suspicious or anomalous activity. So is someone trying to harm you?
Which I would think is a common thing today, right?
Very common thing. Very common thing. And for everybody, not everybody. But we really wanted to do a major build out, and so
you were at the early stage of that, I would assume, as well.
Well, we actually started that in 2007, and we had done our own investments, but then we were sort of at this launch point. If we were going to compete nationwide and globally, we really needed to do more. And so I made the decision to take on investors opposed to borrowing money. And so we ended up working with a search firm, and the search firm actually comes out of Stanford, and which is investors or generally people who have been operators of a company say they're going to invest in smaller companies to help them grow. But they bring in their own management, and that management are generally MBAs, straight out of school, straight out of Wharton or Stanford or Harvard, and they come in to really grow the company, if you will. But more often than not, they're coming in to fix a problem. And we didn't have a problem to fix, right? We just really needed the capital and the guidance, particularly from the investors, not as much from the MBAs. Unfortunately, they came in with a lot of hubris, guns blaring, and feeling like they really knew everything they needed to know about the business, without even ever talking to us or to our clients. And the best way I can describe it is our 2 young MBAs came in November, and it was January before they met with my leadership team.
Wow.
And that really caused a lot of problems. They were doing their spreadsheets and figuring out what they needed to do. And it was I was there for that year, and it was a really, really tough year on all of us. And by the end of the year, so it was in November, so by the following November, the company was no longer profitable. And the entire leadership team always been profitable. And the entire leadership team was really in a mutiny state. They were like, we just can't do this anymore. So I was also an investor in this part of the company, and I walked into our board. I sat on the board of directors and said, these guys have to go. And we had a brief discussion about it, and they said, okay, they're gone. And we had a very tumultuous year, but at the end of that year, they were gone. I came back in full-time to run the company again. And then ultimately, we promoted leadership from within to continue on as senior leadership.
Yeah, so Sari, it sounds like it was not only did they come in and make some changes, but they almost changed the culture of your company in that short year. It was almost like your company culture had shifted.
Yeah, they didn't really, they didn't make too many changes, but the culture is absolutely right. That we were a team. And the best way to think about us as a team is our end-year bonuses. Everybody got the same bonus, right? It wasn't based on your salary. It wasn't based on your job position. We were a team, and we needed every one of us, right, to work together to provide the services that we did to our clients.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they came in, there's a hierarchy, right? They're way up here. The rest of us are peons. But just, if you don't have a sense of curiosity, you can't grow, right?
Yeah.
If you don't know what do people need, what do your employees need, what do your customers need, what's happening out in the world.
No, it's a great perspective. Yeah, it's a great perspective.
A great lesson for our listeners as well.
100%.
We talk culture, company culture is one of the probably the number one topic that we talk about on the show. So you were pretty firm about what had to be done next, and you did it.
We did it.
And,
absolutely.
Was that when you had to go to the board and present your argument about why these guys should be out? You must have been pretty well prepared for that and pretty powerful in your presentation.
Well, I also served on the board, so this had been an ongoing conversation, but it was really, I don't think there was a choice, right? We were going to lose a leadership team. We were going to stop making money, and because I was willing to step back in, it was just really a fait accompli. But it was a stressful year, and I will always be very, very grateful to my leadership team, to really the entire team, to sticking it out.
Yeah.
You know, when I'd say, "Come on, we got to keep doing this," they stuck with me, and I will always be grateful to them for that.
A lot of these stories, though, is fait accompli, but you think it's just obvious this had to be done. But you hear investors and private equity firms and venture capitalists coming in all the time and not necessarily doing what's rational in the names of egos or in the names of how their cash should best be used.
I guess. I wasn't going to let it end any other way.
That was my point. That's exactly what I wanted to get to.
That got back to the fact that you're a better boss than an employee.
A better boss, and I can be a force of nature when necessary. And
so your life now, since the company has changed, and you're still very busy, I know, from my only few weeks of knowing you and how busy you are. I'm going to ask you, we ask everybody, your future vision, your 3-year vision. So this is April of 2028 and we're all here talking, what would have to happen over that 3-year period for you to feel that was a successful year in your life and in your activities?
I guess, from professionally, so we did sell, eventually the company was sold and acquired by a public company. So we had a really good exit. And then I currently teach, right? So I teach cybersecurity professionals who are looking to enhance their career and earn certifications. So when I think about sort of professional vision, I've always really thought about the fact that in cyber, we live in pretty turbulent times, right? That we have an external enemy, those who seek to do us harm. But now we have an internal enemy, I think, as well. And that's those who choose to no longer support our safeguards and our defense mechanisms. So my mission really is to continue to mentor and encourage and really lift up the next generation of cybersecurity professionals who are committed to protecting their companies and their communities and their families and our country.
And I know that you do that out of service because you don't need to do it at this point. And it's not just because it's what you know, it's because you think it's a really imminent threat to communities and to the world, and that's why you're doing this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty amazing. So we always have closing round questions. And my first question for you is, what book are you currently reading?
So I'm currently reading The First Ladies, which is the story about Eleanor Roosevelt and Mary McLeod Bethune. It's historical fiction. I'm not usually a fan of historical fiction. I'm a big nonfiction reader. But this book is it's fascinating because it talks about how these two very, very powerful women, in their own rights, really navigated some very, very brutally honest conversations and ultimately cemented an amazing friendship.
Who wrote that book? Because I've heard about it.
You're going to stump me.
Okay.
It's the same two women who wrote The Personal Librarian.
Yeah, I've heard about the book, and there's a lot of interesting things written about first ladies and their interactions that are accurate. Actually, that it's really interesting behind the scenes stuff that I.
One being the First Lady of the United States, and the other really being considered the First Lady of what she would refer to at the point of Negro population, or what we refer to as African American or Black population.
Right, very, very cool. And I know you have a favorite song, but you've been holding me in suspense about what it is.
Well, I was thinking about that, and it's not actually a favorite song. I love to sing in community. I love when people get together and sing. And when I do a lot of keynoting, and I always make my audience sing a song.
Really?
I'll create a song with lyrics to a tune that they might know. So it might be like "If I Had a Hammer" or "This Land Is Your Land," right? Arlo Guthrie, or not Arlo Guthrie, Woody Guthrie, or Pete Seeger, or Hebrew songs like Oseh Shalom, or even "Sweet Caroline," right? That everybody can go bum bum bum. Right? I love when people
sing for Jason.
There you go. I will.
That is a good one.
But when people sing in a round in harmony, just rousing, and
you and me both.
To me, that's the best.
Yep.
And, you mentioned that I sail a lot, and I would do night watches. And I always knew that these were the songs I loved because to keep myself really focused and stuff, I'd be busy singing these songs. So it's not a song. It's just being able to sing.
Songs.
It's songs. It's
That's
being able to sing together.
Well, you've certainly struck my heart with that because I'm all about the song, both in terms of, what I do as a musician, but I'm singing all the time. For some people like that, some don't. But
I love it. I love singing with people.
Jams.
There you go.
Tuesday
Exactly.
afternoons in the park, we sing and play guitars, and And a lot of people look down on it because, we have different levels of playing there. And some people are like, wow, this isn't really jam sessions. We're just reading chords and singing songs. But I love that. I love doing it with people at all levels of it.
I think the most beautiful instrument is really the human voice, right?
Yeah.
It's cool.
I agree.
Yeah.
Funny you say that, too, because I've always been a musician and a non-singer, but I've been taking voice lessons for the last few years because I realized that I can sing if I choose to. And, some people come by it real naturally. And, first band I was ever in, a guy had never read a note of music in his life, but he just had a voice and he had basically perfect pitch.
Yeah.
We could tune our guitars. We'd say, sing the first note of this song.
Yeah.
And we could tune our guitars to him.
I only say because that's how my daughter is. She's actually leads worship at multiple churches back in Illinois.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so she's never read a note of music in her life, but she just picked up singing. She got after it.
Sing with Tom, your upstairs neighbor.
Yep,
me.
yep.
But I think it's even more than that. I think when people sing, particularly people who aren't professional singers, there's a vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
And when you expose that vulnerability to each other, you just build something really, very special.
And there's something powerful when people come together around something. It's almost like a rally around a song, or just gather around to sing or praise or whatever they're doing. It's cool. There's power in that. I would agree with you.
No question about it. We don't talk about religion a lot, but I know you're a church guy, Jason.
Yeah, for sure.
And you'd mentioned Oseh Shalom, which is a synagogue song. I was very active with music in the synagogue, playing guitar and doing all that. And really, I realized it's such an important part of my spirituality, and then that sort of changed, and I don't have the same connection there anymore. So I'm actually considering, and I'm affiliating with there's a black synagogue in Philadelphia that has all the tunes, but do it in but in a very kind of spiritual setting. And I've actually sat in with them and with the band there and sang, and it's really uplifting. So it's a very interesting experience. Either of you have any closing comments or thoughts? We have about half a minute left.
No, this is a great conversation, and I can't wait to continue and hear your story.
No, I'm excited. I'm actually really intrigued to actually learn a little bit more about all the stuff Sari was talking about, because it's so kind of over my head from what I do. But I know that it's cutting edge and it's forefront of what we need to do, especially when we get to what my 3-year vision is. I think it's going to be important for me to kind of understand that. So it was enlightening for me to hear that kind of firsthand.
You should do something at the Hatchery. They have these mix and mingles. You should talk there.
Yeah.
And people like us can
Exactly.
attend and hear that. It would be a great idea.
Yeah. Us cybersecurity laymen's can come listen.
The Hatchery, by the way, is the workspace, the co-workspace at Babcock Ranch, which people come from all over, outside the community, actually, to come work there. It's pretty interesting. Well, listen, it's great to have you all. Great to have you both here today, and great to have all of you listening to us today. And we always seem to have interesting conversations one way or the other on Founders Forum. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next week on Founders Forum. And have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed your time with Founders Forum and that you found value to take with you throughout your day. Join us again next week for another episode of Founders Forum on WXKB 1039 HD2. Sponsored by Mark J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Beasley Media Group.